Hey guys, we're nearing in on 100 subscribers. We value each and every one of you, your comments, your input, what you want to see, what you like to get out of us. We try to make this a very system of reciprocity. Probably going to do that again. That sounded like shit. We like to be reciprocal with you people. I'm just going to leave it like that. Leave it like that. One person's been commenting a lot, Susan Burgess. And Susan Burgess had a request. She wanted us to review either the Bad Times at the El Royale, which I don't think I really want to do right now, or Madeline's Madeline. Now, I saw the trailer for Madeline's Madeline at the Loft during the Loft Film Fest, and it seemed kind of interesting. So, you ask, you receive.
I don't know what to say.
What is Madeline's Madeline? A question I'm still asking after having seen the movie. Now, Madeline's Madeline is a film about a teenage girl named Madeline who is part of an improv theater group, which is the worst place for a human being to be, if you ask for my personal opinion. She's under the tutelage of a woman who runs the theater group. The woman is pregnant, she's trying to start a family, she's sort of a motherly type of figure, and the more that she experiences Madeline, her acting style, and her inspiration, which comes from her personal life, the more she wants Madeline to become the centerpiece of the improv group and their performances. And this kind of takes the effect where Madeline will come in, and she's what they consider to be sort of a method actor, and she's thinking a lot about her personal life with her mother and things related to her mental illness. And this is really interesting because a lot of this character's inspiration, a lot of her ideas stem from her home life. And more importantly, the biggest question of the film is how much of what she brings to the theater troupe is from her creativity and how much of it is from her mental illness and her ability to cope with the things she deals with in her personal life. And the crux of the film really deals with that relationship with her mother and the relationship with the woman running the theater troupe who takes on a motherly role. She's more encouraging. She encourages Madeline to be herself and really experiment in the theater environment. So as the film progresses, you really do see more of Madeline expressing how she views her home life, how she views herself in relation to the world, and how she wants to be as an actor as well as a person. And that becomes assimilated by the theater group as the woman in charge begins to force everybody else to capitulate around her ideas and around the story of Madeline's life. And one of the questions it really brings up is how art imitates life and vice versa. It's very experimental from a narrative standpoint. You definitely have an unreliable narrator. There are some interesting editing decisions, and it's a very flashy type of movie. At its core, however, one of the biggest struggles with the movie is that your main character is so unreliable. She's very manic at times, she's unpredictable, and she can behave irrationally. So as you're watching this film, you're sort of waiting to see what the objective truth of the matter is. In other words, is Madeline's home life abusive? Is it chaotic and traumatic? Or is she just somebody who fails to cope with what she's dealing with? What's interesting about the movie is it doesn't really explore what her mental illness is. It just sort of states that she has it and that she's on these medications. At one point she runs out of the medication. And you're left kind of wondering if you're seeing the real Madeline or if you're seeing more of manic Madeline or if you're seeing somebody who's in a chaotic or psychotic state. And it's a perfect venue to explore that type of character being in this equally chaotic, equally irrational improv theater environment. The first thing I'll say is that the acting performances are fantastic, and particularly the main character. The facial expressions, the way the character physically moves and carries herself is incredibly impactful. And as someone who's been around people who have suffered from mental illness, it was very familiar from a visual standpoint. There really are invocations of certain mental states that I thought were very effective, very organic, and very realistic. And I think when you're making a film that deals with a mentally ill character, it's important to be respectful of those things and not sensationalize them or be too hyperbolic. Part of the problem, however, is when a character is so irrational at times, and when you really can't get into their head, you really are left with a lot of ambiguity as to whether the character's interpretation of the world is the way that the world actually is around them. And the biggest example I can give of that is when Madeline comes in at one point talking about her dreams, for instance, of fighting with her mother. And at one point she says she has a dream of burning her mother with an iron. You're left wondering if this is a response to abuse at home, and this is her coping mechanism is to have these fantasies or this dream, and coming to the theater troupe to play them out, act them out, and gain catharsis, or if this is a teenage girl who has poor coping mechanisms and, like any other teenage girl, perceives hostility, aggression, or a domineering presence from their parents and really isn't able to rectify that with the reality of teenage angst or the tough environment for her single mother. The result of this ambiguity is For me, it was very difficult to ascertain whether or not Madeline comes from a very traumatic and abusive household, or if she just perceives it that way and she herself is actually abusive toward her mother. The mother doesn't get a lot of screen time in this. However, when she is around, she's very anxious and neurotic, and she definitely seems like somebody who would be difficult to grow up around. However, she at no point really seems to be abusive. If anything, the biggest tension seems to be the mother simply wishes for Madeline to act normal, which is completely unrealistic given Madeline's state of mind. And if that character is really trying to sort of beat her into a normal mold, absolutely you can understand why Madeline is upset about this. The flip side of that is, if this character is in fact so aggressive and abusive toward her mother and acting out to the point where the mother is really losing control and is sort of afraid for her life. And at one point, you do see a scene where Madeline is physically abusive to her mother. You almost wonder if the theater troupe is especially pernicious by engaging and emboldening her fantasies and allowing her to play them out and giving her a fostering environment for those fantasies. In other words, is the theater really encouraging her in these negative thoughts and these feelings of victimization, where really she's more in need of counseling or somebody who can kind of bridge that gap between her mother and her to create a more healthy home life. And there are also very uncomfortable scenes where Madeline is brought to a party full of adults and she's off improv acting, and at first it's kind of interesting as sort of an exhibition for the people who are around, and it's particularly interesting to kids. But over time, people begin to ask, all right, when are we going to drop the act, and are you actually somebody I can talk to, or are you just completely living in a different plane of reality? And unfortunately, that's how I kind of felt as a viewer. It was a little bit hard for me to empathize with the character because at no point did I really feel like I understood what that character's motivation was and whether or not these sympathetic elements of her life were realistic or just her interpretations of the world around her. And one thing that kind of bothers me about films like this or about Rain Man, where you've got a protagonist with a mental illness or a personality disorder or some sort of an issue of that nature, is that invariably the character will seem completely incapable of dealing with people. They'll be socially ignorant or socially awkward, but they will have one superpower. For Rain Man, you know, it's when he's gambling and doing mathematics, and for when it's Madeline's Madeline, it's her acting, and it's, you know, how she's fantastically able to amalgamate into this world. But again, it is kind of frightening if you think that this is this person's delusional escape, that it's being encouraged in this sense, or being kind of put on a pedestal from a narrative perspective. And I'm not really sure if the film was trying to sensationalize mental illness or improv theater, both of which have their own problems. To me, this is a movie that falls into that category where I'm very happy it exists because it is so experimental and it does so many things that I found interesting. Part of my issue is I've seen something very similar done on an even grander scale, which is not to say that it's better, but the idea was really dealt with in a masterful fashion by Charlie Kaufman in Synecdoche, New York. It's a film about somebody who runs a theater and begins making a play about their life, and it really just becomes this Russian nesting doll of, is it the art, is it life, is it art, is it life, am I in the play, am I in real life? He's created all of New York in a warehouse. And you're dealing with some of the same ideas here. This is an artist trying to put herself into this art form as a method of escape, but whereas in Synecdoche you're lost because of the layers of complexity, in this I was lost because I think the character, while complex, really just wasn't fleshed out to an anchoring point where I said, okay, while all of this is happening, at the core, this is who this person is, and now I've got a prism to understand the world around them and have context for the actions befalling them. So in the end, this is a suggestion from Susan Burgess, one of our first subscribers. We value you very much being around here. We thank you for the suggestion. I was very grateful to see this and see how different the film was, and it definitely raised a lot of interesting questions. If you haven't seen it and you're looking for my honest opinion as to whether you should, I would pass. If you have seen it and you liked it, I would love to know why, because again, I didn't understand the character and maybe somebody else does better than me. However, I've seen a lot of movies, and I would just say to the general film-going audience, I didn't understand it. That doesn't mean that you can't understand it, but it definitely means that it's a big red flag that you might not like it and you might not get it in the same way that I didn't get it. So who is Madeline's Madeline? I don't know. I thought it was the French girl with the cartoon. I don't know.